Hello, everyone. My name is Anita, and I welcome you all to this journey into genetics. In this video, we will explore how proteins are made, how small changes in our DNA can cause diseases, and how traits and disorders are passed down in families. Now, the first thing we will start with is protein synthesis. Now, protein synthesis is the process by which our DNA instructions are turned into proteins, and this happens in two stages. These two stages are called transcription, which happens in the nucleus, and translation, which happens in the cytoplasm. Now, during transcription, the DNA unwinds and the RNA polymerase enters into the DNA, uses one strand of the DNA as a template for the mRNA. Now, as you can see, the mRNA is one strand because this is a copy of our DNA. Our DNA is so precious to us, we have to make a copy in order to produce proteins which are essential in our body. So when the mRNA is being produced, it is modified and then it leaves the nucleus to enter the ribosome. Now, translation. mRNA is translated into amino acids as it enters into the ribosome. When the mRNA enters into the ribosome reads the mRNA in groups of three bases known as codons. As the ribosome reads the mRNA, another RNA known as transfer RNA comes in with an anticodon and then and an amino acid. It then comes in. During this process, a condensation reaction happens between the amino acids, and then it goes on and on and on and on and on until the ribosome, which is a subcodon on the mRNA, producing a long chain of amino acids. These amino acids then fold into different shapes, into four shapes, in order to produce the protein. Now, what if a mishap happens? What if a single base is changed during this process? Either a single base is added, or a single base is removed, or it is changed into another one. It can lead to what we know as point mutation. Now, point mutation is known as a single base change in a DNA sequence. It can have effect or it cannot have effect at all. Sometimes when it is changed, it can code for the same amino acid, while sometimes when it is changed, it can code for a different one, leading to a different shape of protein produced, leading to a mutation, which is really, really, really bad in our body. And an example for that is known as cystic fibrosis. Now, cystic fibrosis is caused by a single base change in the CFTR gene, which is responsible for the salt and water distribution in the cell. When the salt and water doesn't do not distribute in the cell properly, it leads to serious health effects in the body. Now, as we know what cystic fibrosis is, we can also know that it can be inherited. Yes, it can be inherited. But for a person to inherit this or to show the symptoms, it has to have two copies of this because it is an autosomal recessive disease. For a person to express the symptoms of this, it has to have two. And I know you're wondering why the person has to have two. Because if it is dominant, the person only need one. But if it's recessive, the person needs two copies of this on their gene for the person to be affected. If the person only has one copy, the person is known as a carrier. That person will not express the symptoms of this disease. The person can only transmit it, can only transfer it to their children. Now, let's talk about gender inheritance. Now, in a female and a male, we all have 46 chromosomes, 22 autosomes, and one pair of sex chromosomes. Now, our sex chromosomes determines the sex of our children. Now, in a female, we have sex cell. We have sex cell known as eggs. In males, they have sex cell known as sperms. In the female sex cell, which is eggs, it have XX chromosomes. Always, every female has XX chromosome. That's two X chromosomes. While in a male, they have X and Y chromosomes. Now, the female will always, the female sex cell will always give X chromosome. If the father's sperm cell gives X chromosome, the child will be a female. If the father gives a Y chromosomes, the father will be a male. Now, not only do we transfer our sex cell to our children, but we can also transfer diseases as well, which can be inherited by the children. If the sex cell or the chromosome of the parents have a disease, the child they can inevitably transfer it to their children. An example of an inherited disease is known as hemophilia. Now, hemophilia is a recessive sex-linked disease common in males, which means this is a recessive sex link. This is not an autosomal not an autosomal chromosome disease, but it's a sex-linked disease. So, for for a female to express this disease, the female must have two copies of this recessive disease on their chromosomes before they can express it. For a male, being that they only have one X chromosome, and if the X chromosome is affected by the disease, they will express it because they don't have a backup chromosome. They don't have a backup X chromosome. They only have a Y. They only have one X chromosome and one Y chromosome. That is why in males it is most common, and in females it is less common. The female must have two copies of that affected gene to express it. If a mother is a carrier and the father is not a carrier, there is a 50% chance that one of her sons would have this disease and one of her daughters will be a carrier. Now, how does this link to our chromosomal dysfunction? If there is a chromosome dysfunction known as having more than more than enough chromosomes in one sex cell, it can lead to something known as Down syndrome. Now, Down syndrome is when a non-dysfunction occurs during meiosis, leading to a person having three copies of chromosome 21. If the chromosomes do not distribute properly in each gamete sex cell or each gamete cell, either eggs or sperm. If one sex cell has two copies and then during fertilization, another copy is added, making them having three copies of that chromosome 21, leading to Down syndrome. Now, this is to show us that our chromosomes play a loads of role in our child in each children's lives. Conclusion. This is to show us that our DNA knows everything about us. Our DNA is who we are, made us who we are. It shows us what would happen, what we could do, and it also gives room for medical conditions that can be saved. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video.